everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we're going to take a look back at the action thriller Black Rain and understand why it remains amongst Ridley Scott's best movies and also one of his most underrated ones. So when looking back at the movie and its release date of September the 22nd, 1989, with back then movie superstar Michael Douglas in the lead role, starring alongside Andy Garcia, Kate Capshaw and Ken Takarawa. Now, the setting of Black Rain follows two NYPD detectives named Cochran and Charlie Vincent on the trail of vicious Yakuza gangster Koji Sato after he murders rivals in a restaurant in New York. Apprehending him, they're tasking later on with arranging a prison transfer to Osaka, Japan. But during the transfer, they are tricked by Sato's men disguised as Japanese police who help aid his escape. Now, the duo remain in Japan to track down Sato under the supervision of Inspector Masahiro Matsumoto, but they find themselves constantly clashing with their Japanese chief of police, both in terms of attitude and also method. As they remain in Japan, they eventually become embroiled in the war between two Japanese gangs, which involves a huge counterfeit money scheme. And as the conflict intensifies, the personal stakes become even greater. So when I look back at Black Rain, I think it's always remained an impressive piece of work within Ridley Scott's career. Very stylish, dark and gritty, it really has that rich visual style and atmosphere that you'd come to expect from the director, who of course has forged his reputation making the likes of Alien and Blade Runner and Gladiator. And as with those movies, Scott showcases those cinematic sensibilities once more, very much old school by filming in location within Osaka, and the director came across various struggles, but I think overall it was worth it. When you look at this movie overall, especially with all of the scenes of the city and the landscape and the environment, they look absolutely fantastic. And it's so great to be reminded of movies that have real backgrounds and surroundings and environments and not just HD filters and green screen that's all too obvious to see. And despite being very much in the genre of an action thriller, we don't get wall-to-wall spectacle here as Scott directs at a composed pace. We do have some standout action moments, whether it's the beginning sequence where we see both Nick and Charlie pursuing Sato in the streets, and of course the climatic shootout battle at the end, involving the battle between two gangs, and also the exciting motorbike chase sequence at the end between Nick and Sato, calling back to the earlier sequence at the beginning of the film. And whilst there is some sort of cultural subtext and commentary here regarding the race of these certain characters, I think it overall doesn't get bogged down too much by it. We do have one standout sequence where Nick comes across a major crime boss 2/3 of the way through the film, and he talks about the whole history behind the World War and how the country of Japan began its recovery, the focus on the Black Rain, a fantastic scene. And moments like this give the film a certain layer and depth, but again, it doesn't get bogged down too much by that overall commentary. And we do balance out the action with great character dynamics. First of all, between Nick and Charlie, and then later on with Nick and Matsumoto, and all three lead actors perform very well. And of course, in the lead role, Michael Douglas is terrific as always. I've said multiple times within this channel that he remains one of the true all-time great versatile actors from the 1980s, forging his successful run within that decade by playing more everyman, morally ambiguous characters with a certain cynicism, and that's really the character of Nick within this film here. Still very much the protagonist of the story, we see straight away that Nick is very flawed, far from the idealistic cop, as we find out that he's under investigation from stealing funds from a certain crime scene, and that he's separated also from his wife. And Douglas brings an intensity and abrasiveness to this character, and it's always good to have a character with different sides to their personality and their history, which keeps them interested and it also keeps the movie interesting, especially in the second half when Nick really becomes the prominent character behind the story. And Douglas is surrounded with great support here, first with Andy Garcia as Charlie, who is very likeable and charismatic, and probably even more appealing as a character than what Nick is, and that was always by design. And it's always good to have that contrast between two buddy cops in this type of story. And he has great scenes with both Nick and also Matsumoto early on within the film. And then we look at Matsumoto as a character, and he is much more of that integrity type of personality, very much brought up by adhering to strict rules and procedures and regulations. We see him initially disapproving of Nick's methods, but later on appreciating the overall efficiency of his type of criminal investigation. And again, he's much more of a rootable character. We quickly talk of Capshaw, who admittedly looks very good here as the hostess of the Japanese nightclubs, but to be honest, it's a minor role here and almost the obligatory female interest in a movie like this. But thankfully, the story avoids generating any love or romantic story between her and Nick, and that's probably a wise move, as that would have likely bogged down the story unnecessarily. And once more, we talk of Hans Zimmer and his musical score here, which is of a high caliber level, and I believe that this was the first collaboration between him and Ridley Scott, and they of course would work together later on many times, most famously of course with Gladiator in the year 2000, and the musical score here is classy stuff as always, just adding to the overall quality of the film. And Hans Zimmer of course remains one of cinema's most greatest and most successful composers ever. So we then quickly move on to the film's overall release, and it was a box office success, staying at the top of the US box office charts for 2 consecutive weeks, overall grossing $134 million from a budget of around $30 million. And it really was a callback to the old school days of the action films within the 1980s, films that would go on to make 3, 4, 5 times their overall budget, a contrast to what we are seeing currently today. And this film was much hype, of course, because it was coming off Michael Douglas' most successful year within his career within 1987, within the huge hits of both Fatal Attraction and of course his Oscar win for playing the iconic portrayal of Gordon Gekko in Wall Street. And Black Rain was very much in keeping with the overall shift in tone in terms of mainstream action films throughout the 1980s, playing much more on those conflicted characters, still heroic but much more with a deconstructive twist, much more of the anti-hero, the wounded, very much more conflicted personalities, that was much more deemed as far more realistic than the action superhero days that what we would see certainly with the likes of Stallone and Schwarzenegger. But despite all of that, Black Rain still remains a very classy and exciting and tense action film, very much underrated throughout Ridley Scott's career. Of course, everybody will mention the greatest hits, as I mentioned before, whether it's Aliens, Gladiator or Blade Runner, but I still think Black Rain is right up there and deserves much more recognition than what it overall has received, both in terms of Ridley Scott's career and also Michael Douglas's one. So a fine film in Black Rain that I think is very much worth watching multiple times again and again and again. So there's my overall thoughts and feelings when looking back at the action thriller Black Rain from the 1980s. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you have any other movies, television series or any other topics within the pop entertainment and culture scene that you'd like to see me cover within the channel, also let me know within the comments and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on that subject matter within the future. So hit and like those subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves and I will see you very, very soon.